Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. With me on this episode of Writers at Work is writer and literary critic Heather Clark, whose latest is The Scrapbook, her fourth book, and debut novel. Heather may be best known for Red Comet, the short life and blazing art of SYLVIA Plath, which was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Prior to that, she published The ULSTER RENAISSANCE, Poetry in Belfast, and The Grief of Influence, Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes. A recipient of a PhD from Oxford, Heather also published essays and criticisms in major media in the US and UK. The scrapbook can be summarized as the story of an intense first love haunted by history and family memory, as it is on the dust jacket. I found it fascinating on several levels. Set in 1996, we indeed experience a tenuous love affair between two students, an American from Harvard and a visiting German. Anna, the American, follows Christoph to his home, and he shows her his Germany, aware that her grandfather was among the GIs who witnessed the devastation at the Dachau concentration camp, while his grandfather fought for the Wehrmacht, the Nazi armed forces. Thus, we are treated to a subtly applied history lesson, one that deals with collective guilt and cultural divide even decades after the World War ended. What motivates Christoph and whether things will end well is a source of suspense as we accompany Anna venturing into worlds not her own. Heather Clark, welcome to Writers at Work.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Can you tell us about when you first thought of writing about post-war Germany?
Sure. I actually started the scrapbook in the late 90s. I was spending a lot of time in Germany, and I was a bit unsettled by what I thought of then as the lack of memorials concerning the war, the lack of monuments when I was down in Bavaria, in that area. And I felt a real sense of disquiet. I knew my grandfather had been an American GI during the war and that he had been at Dachau. And it sort of troubled me so much that I started writing about it. And I wrote about 50 pages of this novel, and then I put it aside for over 20 years, and I recently came back to it and finished it. So it's been simmering for a while.
Well, I noticed you used the W.G. Seabolt's word, disquiet.
Yeah, that was actually the original title for the novel. And then I realized there was another novel with that same title, so I changed it. But that's a huge theme in the book. Yeah, just this sense of disquiet. And
When I'm sorry, but when when you mentioned it in the book, I actually looked up that word because it's not a commonly used word, and it's really perfect for the situation you describe.
yes, and if you go to Germany today, it's full of museums and memorials and monuments. It's a completely different landscape today. But in the late 90s, when this book was set, it wasn't really like that yet. And that was around the time that Germany was really starting to reckon with the war in a pretty serious way. A lot of the old Nazis were dying and kind of making space for these conversations, and a lot of the crimes of the Wehrmacht were also coming out during this time. So I thought it was an interesting time to set the book, when the memory of the war was starting to fade, but it was still this real shadow.
Was it always going to be a novel?
Yes, it was always going to be a novel, but the scope of it changed over the years. And I really did put it away for 20 years, didn't think about it, didn't even think it would still be on my computer. I thought the file would be corrupted. When I went back to it in 2023, I thought there's no way, that this is still this is still legible in Microsoft Word, but indeed it was. So I had a little bit to work from.
So how did you decide on the tone and the tempo? Let me explain why I asked that question. One of the things I liked about the book very much was the writing.
Oh, thank you.
It's directness allowed you to present facts, and at the same time delve into the character's inner thoughts without jarring shifts in the narrative. I think the way you tell the story is part of the pleasing experience of the scrapbook.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me to to hear that from you. Yeah,
So,
there was a certain tone that I was striving for,
and
definitely.
and did you have it from the first draft?
Yes. Yes. In fact, a lot of the early chapters were kind of almost verbatim from that older draft.
Mm,
And yeah, I wanted a kind of lyricism, a kind of understatement, um, but a depth as well. So yeah, I was striving for a certain voice and a certain tone, which was very different from my nonfiction writing.
right. Can I just ask you about the absence of quotation marks?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. This has come up a lot in in interviews, and I actually didn't think I was doing anything strange because so many writers I love don't use quotation marks. I mean, Cormac McCarthy among them, and and I suppose I felt like this is her memory, right? She's writing this down from memory. We don't know if we can even trust her or trust her memories, but something about the quotation marks got in the way a little bit for me, and there was an immediacy in the dialogue without them. And the and I sort of wrote the dialogue. I wanted it to be almost like a poem. Like I wanted
Ah,
that kind of flow. And again, I felt like quotation marks got in the way a bit. And the other reason was there is a real quote in the book from my real grandfather about his experience at the Dachau concentration camp when he was there in late April of 1945. And I use quotation marks around that long quote. And I say at the end, okay, there's one time in the book where I use quotation marks, and it's because it's a real. I'm quoting actual words. I'm quoting an actual eyewitness testimony. So I wanted to kind of separate that out as well.
I mean, it flows. It's very fluid, and I think when we have those chapters that are a reflection of the grandfather's perspective, those are told in the third person.
Yes.
And I think the lack of quotation marks, which generally I don't like, to be honest with you, but I did like it, the fluidity of your writing. Um, it just made the transition to reading Jack's thoughts of what he experienced um, a separate thing from what Anna was telling us.
Good. I mean, that's what I was striving for.
Great.
I wanted to challenge myself to write in a male voice in a kind of from a soldier's perspective in those 1940s sections. I was very inspired by Hemingway. Um, and who's one of my favorite writers, especially Farewell to Arms. That's sort of a touchstone in this novel. So, and I wanted to try to give the reader that experience of, I know it's very fragmented and the reader obviously doesn't get the whole story, but I wanted there to be sort of emotional echoes between the grandfathers and then their grandchildren's story 2 generations later.
Right. And he's not a professional writer.
No.
So it would, if it was too polished, it wouldn't work.
Right, right. And that was the sort of the trick of it.
Right, right,
Yeah. And then in the Hans chapter, the German grandfather on the Eastern Front, there are even flashbacks within that chapter um, in sort of written in a different narrative voice. So I played with narration quite a bit in those sections. Yeah.
right. So tell us about your grandfather versus the grandfather in the book. How close are they?
They're not related at all. And I say that because I did not know much about my grandfather's war. The only thing I knew was what I learned in the scrapbook. And the scrapbook is pretty fragmentary. My grandfather's real scrapbook, which has photos of his wartime experience in France and Germany, and also really horrific photos of the Dachau concentration camp. That's all I knew. And I thought, well, I can spend 2 years in military archives going down rabbit holes and trying to reconstruct his entire experience. I can do that. I'm a researcher. I'm a biographer. I wrote an 1,100-page biography of Sylvia Plath. I know how to do that research, but I didn't want to. I wanted to make it up. I wanted to give myself some imaginative freedom. So I read a lot of soldier memoirs, mostly from men in the 86th Division, which was his division. And I kind of cobbled together this character of Jack O'Brien. Now he goes to the same places that my grandfather went to, but that's it. So I really sort of constructed this character from scratch. Yeah, I would say.
No, I find it fascinating how a biographer approaches fiction. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
you,
yeah.
no, you have this instinct to do your research and to
Yes.
have a factual foundation, yet you're aware that you're writing fiction.
Yes, absolutely. And in a way, I there are places in the book where biography and fiction collide. And that, the place where I quote my grandfather's actual words about Dachau, I just thought,
Mm.
I can't make this up. This is too important. This is eyewitness testimony of war crimes. I don't want to make this up. And so it was, in a way, there's a hybridity about the book. And I have a long bibliography at the end
Right.
of my sources, and my agent said to me, "You don't need this. Why are you putting a bibliography in? It's fiction." And the nonfiction writer in me thought, "Well, I have to give all these people credit, right? All these historians that I learned so much from." And so I really wanted, and I wanted to give people ideas for further reading if they, were interested. So so yeah,
Well,
it's it's very much
when,
a nonfiction fiction
right.
hybrid.
Well, I have to. I love the book for many reasons, but I'll give you credit for very cleverly giving us a history lesson.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I took a lot out of that book in terms of the history and that I had trusted you because of your background. So let me ask you now, how old were you when you came upon your grandfather's scrapbook?
The first time I saw it was in 2015. So
Ah,
about
you were an adult.
I was an adult, and he died at the age of 90, I think early 90s in 2015. He lived a very long life. Not like in the scrapbook, he dies sort of young, and Anna sees the scrapbook and she's in her 20s. Um, I was in the middle of writing Red Comet, and I saw the scrapbook on the dining room table after my grandfather's funeral. My grandmother had brought it out. And I'd heard rumors about this scrapbook, rumors about photos, but we never brought it up with him because we knew he did not want to talk about this, and we respected it. I think I was scared to talk about it with him, although I wanted to know more. And of course, now I regret not asking him more. But yeah, I just promised myself that I would go back to this story at some point. And after I finished Red Comet, um, I didn't want to write with footnotes anymore for a while. And
Right,
I just
right.
started, I went back to this novel, and I just started writing it again. I write and it just kind of all came, and I didn't tell anyone I was writing it. I just wrote it.
Yeah. For storytellers like us, I think it can be difficult to understand why they didn't want to talk about
Yes.
the war. I learned more about my father's wartime experiences from strangers than I did from him.
Oh, wow.
And Wall Street Journal reader sent me some photos of my father. I had never seen any of them,
Oh my God.
and I had no idea that this is what he did during the war, which was nothing as dangerous as your grandfather, but nonetheless, I don't know that you could have said to your grandfather, "Tell me."
Right.
I just don't. I think maybe people younger than we are who don't have relatives with wartime experience may not understand that, but it was just a wall that we could not violate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they came home, they won the war, they were quote unquote heroes, but they saw horrific things, right? In Germany
Right,
and the Pacific. And I think in a lot of cases, all of that got buried. And a lot of people have written to me, actually, a lot of men have written to me recently saying, "Oh, my father or my grandfather was in this division and in Germany, and he never talked about what he saw there." And so, yeah, it was a gesture of respect, right?
Right.
You're 19, 20 years old, you're standing at the abyss of the 20th century at Dachau, seeing the worst things that human beings can do to each other, and you have no frame of reference for the Holocaust. You don't know what you're walking into. He
Right.
always said that the one time he talked about, he said, we had no idea. Nobody told us. Nobody told us what we were walking into. So I had a lot of compassion after I saw the photos in the scrapbook just for what he went through.
Yeah, I wonder if you're, of course, we don't know and we're speculating, but I wonder how your grandfather would feel about all this, your writing and the way it's being received.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and of course, I never would have written this book during my grandfather's lifetime or my grandmother's. She passed away a couple of years ago, and I don't know. It's a really good. He was an autodidact. He read voraciously, and he loved to talk about history and politics and especially wartime history, but not World War II. That was sort of verboten. It's a good question. I just don't know.
Right.
it's-
I think you can allow yourself to know that he would be pleased
I hope so.
because it is done respectfully.
I hope so.
So how much of Heather Clark is in Anna?
Well, that's a good question, and I've sort of made my peace. I made my peace a while ago with the fact that, oh, everyone's just going to think she's me, but
Right.
she's not. And in a way, I almost wanted to give this impression of a memoir. Like if people think that it's actually sort of a real memoir, I'm doing my job as a novelist. There's obviously autobiographical scaffolding. I'm playing with that a little bit. Harvard, I went to Harvard.
Right.
I went to Oxford, I went to Groton. So there's that scaffolding, but on top of that, I really I felt this imaginative freedom to just spin fictions. And I do have a lot, I have several close German friends, and we talk about the war a lot, and we have for years. And so a lot of that sort of went into the discussions. I thought a love story would be an interesting way to frame um, all of this. And many times when I was in Germany, hanging out with my friends, I kept thinking about, did our grandfathers fight, with each other?
Right. Sure.
I was sort of obsessed with this. I couldn't get it out of my head that these friends, that their grandfathers had been, maybe, who knows, maybe in the same battle as my grandfather. And that's where it all started. That's where part of the seeds of the book. So yeah, I mean, there's again autobiographical scaffolding, but there's, fiction spun and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
alternative truths and I had, yeah, it was liberating for me to not stick to the facts, to be able to kind of create this different imaginary world that was still grounded in my own life. I don't know that
Right.
I could write something completely out there, like a fantasy world or anything. I felt like I needed some anchor to my own life.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I found Anna appealing in part because I was frightened for her.
Mm.
Um, I'm old enough to be Anna's grandfather. So, I mean, perhaps it befits her age, but I think she's pretty naive. Is
Yeah.
is that is that fair?
Yes. And I wanted her to be naive. It's her first time in Europe. By the time I was Anna's age, I had been writing for Let's Go travel guides in Europe for several summers. I've been hitchhiking all around Europe. Like I had a lot of street smarts, but I wanted her to be very naive and very innocent and kind of not not see red flags maybe that she should have seen with Christoph and I was trying to write about this idea of like what happens when we allow somebody when we allow someone to seduce us, right? And we lose ourselves to the wrong person or maybe the wrong political idea or we're hypnotized, right? And so She she says at one point, I was losing myself and I knew it and I didn't care.
Right.
And that's a dangerous place to be. And I wanted to explore that emotional terrain. Yeah.
And you do it really well because you know very often she's the only person in the room and isn't speaking German.
Yes.
And she doesn't understand what people are saying. And she's in a place that um, seems somewhat familiar, like a beer hall,
Mhm.
but isn't familiar. And I kept thinking, God, she's alone here. Does she
Mhm.
understand that?
Yes. And I wanted to build this tension where she's in a relationship and a country she can't trust. And there are no Ubers. She can't call an
That's
Uber
right.
when she's stuck at a party with Christoph and he's abandoning her. He's not being very nice to her. She can't call her friends on her cell phone. She's got to have a phone card. She's got to find a phone booth. Like all of these things that we grew up with in the 90s, she's really dependent on Christoph and she doesn't speak German. And so there's a sense of loneliness and kind of, yeah, fear and alienation that I think many of us who were if we've ever been in one of those relationships, like a cross-cultural kind of thing, and we go there and that moment of everyone speaking the other language and you just feel so foolish or insecure, that I wanted to get some of that in there.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When I tend to approach things from a pop perspective. I just can't help it. I'm not classically trained. I'm a pop guy. Um, but when you put Christoph and Anna in the Black Forest, man, that was really terrifying. That was like I thought to myself, my goodness, this historian has written this very suspenseful, terrifying novel. Sorry,
Well,
sorry.
good. I mean, I'm did you think he was going to murder her or something like that?
I no, not murder her,
Okay.
but not respect her.
Yeah, not respect her. Right.
Right.
Right. I wanted that tension to sort of be there throughout the novel, this psychological tension. Is he good for her? Is he bad for her? And to what extent is she going to realize that there were points in the novel I really wanted to shake her and but she became her own character and I had to let her figure it out. And I wanted it to be ambiguous. I didn't want to give people neat, clean um anything really in their relationship. I mean, it's messy and it's got a lot of passion, but a lot of pain, and I wanted to keep it ambiguous and unresolved in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah. You share with the reader the following quote from Sylvia Plath. Every woman adores a fascist. What, as Sylvia Plath's biographer, what do you think she meant by that?
Well, I that line has always fascinated me. And I've been thinking about it for, I don't know, 20 years now. Um, I think Plath was making really interesting connections in that poem, Daddy, regarding totalitarianism, patriarchy, and submission. And these are big philosophical ideas that I tried to explore on a smaller canvas in the novel. And, Anna, she knows she's losing herself to this beautiful, magnetic, foreign, sophisticated man. The week they meet, she focuses on him rather than her exams. And she literally will exile herself for Christoph. Like she'll leave her country and go to Germany and live there. And so I was just interested in that relationship between seduction and control that Plath plays with in that poem. And um Plath, I think she's doing it in a much more sophisticated way than I did. And of course, every woman doesn't love a fascist, right? Of course, that's not true. But she's making interesting connections, I think, and I wanted to explore some of those in the novel. And Christoph, he says that. He says that's not true. And Anna says, I know it's not true, but it's a great line.
Yeah, there are five words in that sentence, and each one of them is ambiguous.
Hmm.
I mean, we don't know what every means. We
Yeah.
don't know her definition of woman. We don't know her definition of adores. We don't know what she means by fascist. I guess the is okay. But that's why I haven't spent 20 years on it, but I can tell you that I stared at it thinking, how do I comprehend this?
Right, right. And
Uh,
it's one of her most famous lines in all of her work. And I almost had felt like I had to bring it into this novel, right? Because and that's a moment of meta. I don't know.
right.
My biographer self kind of breaking out. But I have thought a lot about that line and this is I'm a woman writing about war and I'm trying to write about the afterlife of war and in a way, Christoph is damaged by the war, even though he's a grandchild. His grandfather was a perpetrator, and he is carrying that damage. He's been raised in this culture of silence and repression and shame, and Anna's kind of absorbing some of that. And how much will she absorb of it? And what's the cost to her, right? So
Right.
they're interesting, feminist themes here that um yeah, how much will she absorb of Kristoff's damage? And she's a little damaged too. I mean, they're both, you know, they're
Yeah, I think Anna's. I don't really know why Anna is damaged. I mean, she seems to be, you know, I liked her friends, and I thought, well, never mind.
yeah.
Christoph.
Just in
Anyway,
the fact that she just misses these she's not as aware, let's
yeah,
say,
yeah,
about Kristoff as maybe she should be. And I mean, the idea is that, her grandfather was wounded and psychologically and probably had PTSD. And to what extent does that trickle down, right?
right,
Generations. Even
right,
even when even though he's the hero, they were the victors, there's still a cost, right?
sure.
So I was interested in that too, and maybe damaged is too strong a word for her, but there's something going on there.
Yeah. I want to get back to the writing, which again I've praised. Um, and,
Thank
and I
you.
noticed that sometimes, just a single word can make a difference in how we as the readers react. And there was a great example in this. At one point, you used the word unsettling rather than something benign like uncanny. And this occurs when we see a photo that reveals that Christoph resembles his grandfather.
Right.
Um, you know, the resemblance is unsettling,
Yes.
which unsettles us
Yes.
as readers. Do you labor over such things, or does the right word appear to you when you need it?
I do labor. I do labor over these things. I mean, I went through this book uh, on a sentence level. I mean, all writers do that, line editing, but I went through at least 20 drafts of it, just really going over it sentence by sentence, word by word. And to me, this book seemed so incredibly short because my previous one had been almost 1,200 pages. So um, I felt like I was really able to do that. And yeah, the word unsettling. I wanted this novel to unsettle. I didn't want it to entertain or comfort. I wanted it to haunt. I wanted it to unsettle. I wanted people to have this sense of disquiet. And I didn't want it to be an easy book. And it's interesting. That word has appeared probably, that's the one word that keeps appearing in reviews is unsettling.
Really?
It's
Really?
unsettling. Yeah. Yeah. And what's the other word? Elegant. Those are the two words that I keep seeing.
You,
Um,
you, you unsettled the reviewers.
yeah, maybe. I don't.
Yeah. Well, no, I just think it's a lesson for writers in this, and that you don't have to spend a half a chapter setting up a scene in order to make the reader feel something. You can achieve it with a surprising word in a single sentence.
Yes. Yeah, and I wanted that moment also to be ambiguous in the sense that is it really Christoph's grandfather or is Anna kind of so, you know, um obsessed or mixed up at this point that she kind of imagines that it's his grandfather. You know what I mean? I wanted that to be an ambiguous moment as well. And that's
Yeah.
what's another thing that's just unsettling about the novel as a whole. You never quite know if you're on steady ground in a sense.
Yeah. There's an exchange between Anna and Christoph, again, presented subtly, but to me revealed the unbridgeable gap. in their perspective. He says, and I'll mispronounce this, I'm sorry, but I thought I could take you to Berchtesgaden. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not a German speaker,
Oh,
so
okay, okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I thought I could take you to Berchtesgaden so you can see where your grandfather went in 1945. And then Anna says, really? And he replies, yes, it's beautiful up in the Alps.
Right.
And she responds warmly to the invitation, but we, the reader, know that her grandfather was not sightseeing,
Exactly.
that Hitler had a home there, that he met with Neville Chamberlain there, that the property was seized by Anna's grandfather and his unit at great risk.
Mhm.
Um, am I being too hard on Christoph? 'Cause-
No, 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 you're not, because Christoph is on the one hand, he tries to understand what happened, and he's sort of meticulous about metabolizing all of this German guilt, post-war guilt. But on the other hand, he doesn't really look closely. He thinks maybe the furniture in the house is, well, I won't spoil it, but maybe not where his father says it comes from. And he doesn't look closely enough, really. He is in a kind of dodgy fraternity, right?
right,
He decides not to join the peacekeeping mission in the Balkans. He to prevent another genocide. He'd rather stay home and drive an ambulance. So Christoph, it's and in a way you can't blame him. It's hard to kind of face up to these things, but yeah, he isn't really facing the history head on. And Anna's not facing the problems in their relationship either, right? So they're
right,
both sort of looking away. They're both in denial a bit. And yeah, Berchtesgaden is that's the whole thing. He keeps taking her sightseeing, and yet where they go, they keep encountering the horrors of the war and their own family's history.
right. And I think one thing that you do very effectively, again, which is another asset that writers have, is that you are counting, I think, on at least your American readers informing the story in some way. My example is, I'm a post-war American whose family members fought in Germany during the war. It's been almost 80 years since the war ended, yet my opinion about Germans is still informed by the war and mass media.
Mhm.
Did you count on your American and British readers having those types of prejudices?
That's a good question. Um, I'm not sure. I think there's so much in the book about how Anna's perspective on the war is shaped by American media,
Right,
right? She's at Dachau, and she kind of is trying to understand the suffering that occurred there, and all she can think of is Sophie's Choice and Schindler's List. And
right,
she's kind of disgusted by herself that that's where she goes. But I was interested in those questions, and how do we mediate the war, right? We mediate it through photographs and movies and museums, and these are very American perspectives that Anna's bringing to these journeys and her relationship with Christoph. So maybe I did. And when they were in the courthouse in Nuremberg, where the trials were held, and again, thinks all I could think was pure Hollywood, right? Justice at
right,
Nuremberg.
right, right,
And so yeah, I suspect that was part of it. And one of my worries about this book was that it would be too American for a European audience and too European for an American audience. And I felt I felt like I was really straddling these kind of two different literary traditions and lineages and histories, and but I just decided to go for it.
yeah. What has been the reaction among German readers? Do you know?
I don't really know. I did a reading in Berlin last month. I did a European tour, and Berlin was one of the places, and I was very nervous about it. Um, but people seemed very interested, and one of the comments was, "We have to keep the memory of the atrocities alive." And maybe this is how you do it, through fiction, rather that kind of grabs the reader's attention and keeps them turning the pages rather than a textbook. Somebody said that at one of my
Oh,
a
interesting.
German person said that.
Yeah.
Um, so Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what there haven't been any German reviews as far as I know. So, but it's very it's a book that's really steeped in German history and I'd be interested to hear
Yeah,
more.
the one subject that comes up more often than I would have thought at Writers at Work is the concept of meeting the reader's needs rather than their desires.
Hmm. Hmm.
We don't have any responsibility at all to give the reader what the reader wants. We
Right.
have a responsibility to give the reader what the reader needs to understand the story,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
it's not a screed, it's not a diatribe, it's not a speech, it's a story. And you give the reader what they need to understand the inner lives of the principal characters.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was trying to do in terms of I mean, I wanted readers to understand maybe why Christoph is the way he is, and I was trying to do it with some subtlety and not be didactic about it, but just this what it was like to grow up in
Right,
in this culture and for me, the most important line in the book is he was leaving me because of the war.
right.
Just that's my to me that kind of that line means a lot to me, right? That this relationship maybe it survives, maybe it doesn't, but there's trouble. There's trouble because she kind of forces him to confront some of this dark history.
Yeah. Anna has two really interesting Jewish friends who are
Yes.
in New York, and they are openly disdainful of Christoph, both in concept and in the result of what they perceive to be his mistreatment of Anna. Where do you come down on their points of view? Because they withhold nothing,
Right.
and I believe
Yeah.
that their care for Anna transcends their hatred for Germans who had any relationship whatsoever to the Holocaust.
Yes. That is sort of what I was going for. I wanted to write about the value of female friendship in this book because Anna's so alone in Germany and she's so dependent on Christoph and he's really hot and cold and she can't kind of figure him out. And her female friends, her girlfriends are her anchors. They understand her, they're looking out for her best interest. And yes, they don't like Christoph because he's German. And every time she starts romanticizing him to them and saying, yeah, but he's not anti-Semitic, and oh, this was all a long time ago. And they kind of remind her, this wasn't that long ago. It was 50
Right.
years ago, two generations. What did his grandfather do in the war? Because I can guarantee that directly or indirectly involved killing Jews. I mean, that they kind of are there to remind her of this history when she wants it to go away, too. So, and this, what, in the 90s, this history did feel a lot closer. And I remember at Harvard, the Hitler's Willing Executioners came out. And that book was a really big deal. Daniel Goldhagen's book, and it was sort of accusing ordinary Germans of being much more involved in the Holocaust than had previously been assumed. And it was controversial, but there was a lot of talk about it then, and I thought that was important to bring up that book and how it was kind of changing people's views at the time. So yeah,
And also, Anna's friends um, succeed in telling us or showing us that Anna has been putting on a brave front for us.
yeah,
That there is a that Anna is not heroic all the time and above it all the time and calculating and intellectual all the time. That she really bears herself to her friends,
yes,
and we see a new dimension in her.
yeah, she can be honest with them in a way that she kind of can't be with Christoph because she's so, I think, worried in a sense that, oh, if I say the wrong thing, I might.
But you give us a three-dimensional character that way.
Good. I mean that's why I wanted to include the friendship and those scenes, and they were they felt very those felt difficult to write actually because the rest of the book is in such a different tone, and then all of a sudden you're writing in the tone, very casual dialogue, the kind you have with girlfriends, and it felt so different to the rest of the book with me, but it felt honest.
Yeah, I also got the sense, and this could be way off, but I got the sense that her friends, as descendants of families affected by the Holocaust, were saying, we deserve a good time. We deserve to go out and party. We've earned it through the suffering of our forebearers. And Anna didn't have that experience.
No.
So maybe see, I'm telling you
Yeah,
now.
no, that's interesting. That's interesting. No, I hadn't that hadn't occurred to me. But I think she feels this need maybe to bear witness because her grandfather bore witness.
Right, right.
Um and that kind of compels her to go to all of these places in Germany with Christoph and yeah, there's a difference there, certainly.
Yeah,
And of course, I'm not Jewish, and I had a lot of course, I was concerned, writing about this history from a non-Jewish perspective, and it was something I thought about every day, and I just tried to be as sensitive and respectful as I could, and learn as much as I could, and but I thought it was also an interesting perspective to bring. Anna's not the descendant of a survivor. She's the descendant of a quote unquote liberator or a witness. And what does that
right,
mean, right?
right. As you can tell, I could talk about the scrapbook for hours. But
Good. I'm happy to hear it.
let me ask you, what's next for Heather Clark?
So I have two biographies under contract with Knopf, and I just finished a group biography of Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, Adrienne Rich, and Maxine Kumin in Boston in the late 50s. Yeah, so they were friends and they all knew each other then. So that will be coming out hopefully in about a year and a half. And then I'm also working on a big biography of Anne Sexton, the American poet.
Wow.
So I'm busy.
And fiction?
I
Uh,
hope more fiction. Yes, I have some things in mind, and we'll see. We'll see how this book does and if they want any more. We'll see.
My guest on this episode of Writers at Work has been Heather Clark, whose novel, The Scrapbook, is a compelling tale on several levels, all of which deeply satisfy. Heather, thank you for joining me on Writers at Work.
Thank you so much for having me.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersatworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.